Now, the focus this August is on women, and while we are rightly highlighting the achievements and the contribution that women have made to South Africa and the world, we at Expresso want to ensure that women feel heard beyond just Women's Month celebrations. And that's why this morning we've invited the director of and attorney for Legalese, Eitan Stern, and he's going to be sharing more about the rights of women and what we have in the workplace within South Africa's legal framework. Eitan, so good to have you on the show this morning.
Really great to be here.
You know what, I think it all started with the hashtag #MeToo and Time's Up movement that happened in Hollywood, and it kind of just put the whole harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace in the spotlight. But before we go any further, can we just contextualize and clarify what exactly is sexual harassment in the workplace?
Okay, so what it is any conduct of a sexual nature which is unwanted and infringes someone's right to equality in the workplace.
Okay.
So, you know, and that's going to be anything which is persisted, any like conduct which is persisted, unwanted is a big factor in it, and anything that would be deemed just inappropriate in the workplace. So, you know, that someone should know is inappropriate, like a boss making unwanted moves on an employee. That's just, it's always going to be inappropriate. Interestingly enough, it doesn't have to be from like an employer to an employee. It can be anyone. You can be sexually harassed by anyone in the workplace, a co-worker, a junior, a supplier. It doesn't even have to be at the office. It can be, you know, in any work context, emails, after work, SMSs, WhatsApp, anything.
Exactly. Now, what legal grounds does a woman have to lay a complaint with HR? Does it have to be one instance of sexual harassment, or does it have to have built up over time?
Yeah, okay, so it definitely can just be one instance, and we've sort of built up a culture in which we've minimalized sexual harassment, so women think they have to build up this big case in order to prove that something wrong has happened, but it's not like that in the slightest. It can be one incident, and the main thing to focus on is unwanted. You know, and that can be anything physical, obviously, like touching or groping. It can be any harassment which is verbal. So any words that are spoken can also be non-verbal harassment, and that can be something like sending unwanted pictures or, you know, even gestures. And of course, it can be what we call quid pro quo harassment, which is, you know, like the Harvey Weinstein sort of thing, which is, you know, if you do this, then you'll get a raise, etc. And all that stuff is, you know, any conduct of that nature is considered sexual harassment.
It's so important that women report this, but in a very real sense, if you are working in a very male-dominated industry, do women actually come forward? Are they not afraid that they'll be victimized, that no one will listen to them, you know, that the case might go nowhere?
Definitely, and that's like that's a problem that our society has, and that's what this Me Too movement is highlighting, that women are terrified to bring these things up, and the consequences are real. You know, women do lose their jobs over it, and there are backlashes, and that's, you know, that's like the social issue that we have, where we've minimalized sexual harassment and we've created a culture where women are afraid to speak up. And, you know, the law is trying to address that issue by you know, putting protections in the law and allowing women to speak up. But it's, you know, the law can only go so far. It's up to us as society to create a culture, especially in the workplace, where women feel that they're able to speak up, and, you know, and that these issues are serious.
Should you have put this, you know, this case forward, should you have reported it and it came to nothing? Should you just continue fighting your battle? Should you contest it if it's just fallen away?
I would say definitely. Of course, you know, it's hard for one person to tell anyone else what to do in such a sensitive situation. But certainly, you know, what should actually be happening is companies should have policies that, you know, that determine what is harassment and what women should do in these instances. The company should have a grievance policy where a woman is able to take this forward and lay a complaint. If nothing happens in that instance, women are still able to take this forward. It's defined under the Employment Equity Act as unfair discrimination. And so the CCMA is there for women to take the complaints to. If the CCMA don't do anything about it, they can approach the Labour Court, and they can appeal that to the High Court. So the law has lots of mechanisms for women to take these things forward. Of course, it's tough, and that's why the main focus should start to be on companies creating procedures for where women can report harassment in the workplace.
It's really discouraging that we even have to talk about things like harassment in the workplace when you're just coming there to try and make ends meet. But fortunately, we still have Eitan here with us. We have only begun to scratch the surface with attorney Eitan Stern. So keep it locked onto your Feel Good Breakfast show. And of course, as we find out more about women's rights in the workplace. After the ad break, we'll look at wage inequality.
It's my Feel Good Breakfast Show.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Well, August is Women's Month, and it's all about female empowerment, and that's why we've invited the director of and attorney for Legalese, Eitan Stern, to Expresso to equip us as women with knowledge about the rights that we have in the workplace within South Africa's legal framework. Now, Eitan, the one that I want to talk about is salaries and the pay gaps between men and women in the workplace. It's shocking. You've heard so many stories. Of course, it's also received a lot of media scrutiny over the last few months, but what is a person's right to go to your company and find out where you stand on the pay grade of the company?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because essentially in a private company, salaries are confidential, and you'll probably see in your employment contract it will say that your salary is confidential. So women, or anyone doesn't really have a fantastic right to approach their company and get this information. It's generally the sort of thing that you have a feel for, and you would know from talking to your colleagues. That changes when it's any kind of government position or public company position where certain salaries are made public. But in general, there's no fantastically easy answer to that. You can't really just go to your boss and demand to know what everyone's paid. Exactly.
And also, if you and your colleague does have a conversation, you can't even take that information to a boss because you shouldn't even be talking about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There isn't actually pay differentials in the law are legal. You are allowed to be paid different salaries. Even people in the same position can be paid different salaries. The issue around the gender issue is where you are paid something different just because you are a woman.
Exactly.
So it has to be, the inequality has to be connected to your gender for there to be something untowards going on.
I saw that there's this perception that women don't earn as much as men because they're not as good as negotiating for better salaries than men are. Is that true, or is that just...
So it's an interesting one. So we actually talked about this in the office yesterday, and my answer as a male was saying, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
But in my company, where most of the lawyers that work for us are female, they all said it was certainly true. So when we looked into it, we found a study that said that 68% of women are more inclined to accept the offer that they're given, as opposed to 50% of men who are inclined to accept that offer. So when you look at the statistics, it turns out it is true. Women are less likely to argue a salary or to negotiate a higher salary. And also there was an Australian study that found that even when women do negotiate a better salary, they are less likely to be given an increase. And that's a social issue that we have in our society. My reaction to it kind of showed it was typical because I'm a male, and that's why I thought that. But turned out when we looked at the research and asked females about it, turns out, it's definitely true.
That is shocking.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That is very shocking. What if you find out that you are indeed getting paid less than your male colleague who's doing the same work, who maybe started after you started? What are your rights? Can you go to the CCMA? What is your recourse?
Okay, so unequal pay is connected to what we call unfair discrimination, and that's something in the Employment Equity Act. So an unfair discrimination is dealt with in a labour context. So you're definitely able to, first of all, go to your company and find out. If that doesn't work, you can go to the CCMA. If that doesn't work, you can approach the labour courts. And if that doesn't work, you can always approach the High Court about it. So there's a kind of chain of command here. The thing to remember is what I mentioned a moment ago, that pay differentials in and of themselves they're legal. It is okay to do it. There has been a big kind of focus in the law, and there were new regulations that were put in the last couple of years, which kind of put a spotlight on equal pay for equal work. But again, there are factors that a company would consider in deciding a pay differential, such as you said, how long someone's been at the company, the qualifications of that person, etc. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that men and women or two people in the same position are paid equal. There can be factors, but, and it's a very big but, if the factor that was considered was that you are paid less because you are female, or if you have a suspicion of that, then you can approach one of the mechanisms I've mentioned. The difficulty or the thing that you need to make sure is that you got evidence and proof of it.
Wow, thank you so much, Eitan. Like I
Sure.
said, this is one of those things that we can just continue talking about, and we
Yeah.
need to continue talking
Let's hope we
about
do,
it
yeah.
because change needs to happen.
Hopefully.
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for being here with us. And like we said, it is so valuable for anyone to know their rights when it comes to feeling safe and comfortable in the workplace. And unfortunately, it can still be very difficult for a woman to assert herself amongst her male peers. So to all of the women out there, equip yourself with this knowledge so that you are never taken for granted in the workplace.